You and your friends are walking across a sweltering parking lot toward the car. Suddenly, somebody breaks into a dead sprint and shouts the magic word. Shotgun. We all know exactly what that means. You just claim the right front passenger seat. You get the legroom, you control the music. You are in charge of the air conditioning. It is a sacred pact of the road. But here's the wild part. That coveted seat used to belong to a very serious man holding a very real shotgun, whose entire job was guarding giant piles of cash from actual highway bandits. Back before auxiliary cables, drive-through windows, and satellite maps, that right front seat was not just for immaculate road trip vibes. It was a high-stakes job, a dangerous Old West job. The guy sitting there held a short, incredibly mean-looking gun across his lap. His employer was usually an outfit like Wells Fargo, and his biggest problem on any given Tuesday was a sudden ambush by outlaws who made a very good living stopping isolated coaches in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So here's the question we never really stop to ask while we are fighting over who gets to ride up front. Why put the armed guard right out there in the open, sitting next to the driver? Why not hide him inside the coach like a surprise for the robbers? What exactly was he protecting that was worth catching a bullet for? What kind of weapon was he actually holding? And most importantly, did people back in the 1800s actually yell riding shotgun the way we do right now? Let us start with the seat itself. Sitting way up front and high off the ground, the guard could see the road unfold. He could spot trouble long before it spotted him, but he was also there to do something a little boring but absolutely vital. If the driver took a bullet or got knocked off balance, the guard had to drop what he was doing, grab those heavy leather reins in a split second, and keep a panicked team of horses from completely bolting into the wilderness. Safety first, firepower second. So what was he risking his life for? Gold dust, banknotes, legal documents, and hefty payrolls. All of this immense wealth rode in a massive express box, commonly called a strongbox, made out of heavy iron or steel. This box was not just tossed in the trunk. It sat right up near the driver, physically bolted down to the floorboards by heavy hardware. If you keep the guard near the box, a thief has to look right down the barrels of a gun to even try and pry it loose. Now let us talk about the guy holding that gun. In the 1860s, straight through the 1880s, massive stagecoach lines like Wells Fargo hired specialized armed guards. Officially, they called this man a shotgun messenger or an express messenger. The word messenger here does not mean he was cheerfully delivering birthday cards or tossing mailbags onto porches. It meant he was solely responsible for protecting those high-value express shipments with his life. He was riding guard. The perch he sat on worked perfectly for the job. High up on the front box beside the driver, he had an unobstructed panoramic view of the rugged trail ahead. He could easily scan the distant ridgelines and the dense brush for anything out of the ordinary. He could keep a protective eye on the heavy iron strongbox resting right by his boots. And just as importantly, he could plant his feet and brace himself, because those overland rides were anything but smooth. Let us look at the stagecoaches themselves. The famous Concord stagecoaches were massive, weighing around 2,500 to 3,000 pounds empty. And they used thick leather straps for suspension, known as thorough braces. These leather straps gave the huge coach a rocking, swaying motion, almost like a boat tossing on the ocean. The driver and the guard sat high up and tilted slightly forward. It was fantastic for spotting danger, but it also left them totally exposed against the sky if someone was aiming at them. Which brings us to this tool of the trade. The messenger did not carry a long, heavy military rifle. He carried a short, incredibly brutal double-barrel shotgun. Folks out west called it a coach gun. It was usually a massive 10 or 12 gauge weapon, with barrels chopped down to anywhere between 18 and 22 inches. It had 2 triggers and 2 very quick shots. It was built for one thing, and that was stopping a fight the exact second it started. Why does a short barrel matter so much? Think about that bouncing, swaying seat we just talked about. Fights on the trail were chaotic and up close. A short gun was incredibly fast to lift, swing, and point. You did not need the pinpoint accuracy of a sniper rifle. You just needed a massive spread of heavy shot that made bandits instantly dive into the dirt. Plus, the sheer psychological terror of 2 giant muzzles staring down at you was usually a massive deterrent all on its own. Stagecoaches were predictable, which made them giant targets. They lumbered along at roughly 8 to 10 miles an hour over rough terrain. The teams of tired horses had to be changed out at relay stations every 10 or 15 miles. Outlaws knew this schedule perfectly. If you were a thief, you could just pick a sharp bend, a narrow rocky cut, or a dry canyon right before a station, hide in the brush, and set the absolute perfect trap. So the messenger had to keep his eyes on absolutely everything. He watched the horizon for dust clouds where there should be absolutely no dust. He watched the sky for birds suddenly spooking out of the trees. He stared into the heavy brush that could easily hide a desperate man with a rifle. He kept his hands resting near the shotgun and his feet perfectly ready to brace against a sudden stop. He was guarding the box first, the driver second, and the passengers third. To see exactly why this specific seat mattered, look at a very real fight from March 15, 1881. We are in the Arizona Territory. A Kinnear and Company stagecoach is rolling through the darkness near a place called Drew's Station. Suddenly, out of the pitch-black brush, the first volley of gunfire erupts. The driver, a man named Bud Philpott, takes a direct hit and immediately slumps over in his seat. The coach is completely out of control. Riding up front with him is a Wells Fargo shotgun messenger named Bob Paul. In one terrifying instant, Paul hauls in the heavy reins, fighting to keep the panicked team of horses from bolting into the canyon. In the exact same instant, he brings his short shotgun up to his shoulder and unleashes a massive blast of buckshot directly into the dark brush. The horses surge wildly, and the heavy coach violently lurches out of the ambush kill zone. The coach races away into safer open ground. Later on, Bob Paul would help identify the suspects, who were closely tied to the simmering outlaw tensions around the infamous town of Tombstone. Historical reports sometimes differ on exactly who fired which shots first, but the core point remains crystal clear. The messenger was put in that specific seat to fight the robbers and to steer the coach if the worst happened. That is the entire reason the passenger seat existed. Now let us look at the other side of the barrel. Meet Charles E. Bowles, a notorious outlaw better known to history as Black Bart. He robbed 28 different Wells Fargo stagecoaches between 1875 and 1883. He specifically targeted the lonely mountain routes in Northern California. But he was not a wild, screaming bandit. He dressed incredibly neat, wore a bowler hat, and he even left polite little handwritten poems behind after he stole the cash. Black Bart was a master of picking his moments. He almost always chose the lightly guarded runs. During one robbery, he supposedly set up a row of sticks on a ridge to look exactly like a gang of waiting riflemen. The lone driver saw the fake rifles and wisely decided not to argue. A massive chunk of Black Bart's most successful hauls happened when there was absolutely no shotgun messenger sitting on the box. He wanted the money, not a messy shootout. Wells Fargo was not stupid, and they learned the math incredibly fast. They started putting more armed guards on more coaches across their entire network. The company and local law enforcement turned up the heat, and eventually, the gentleman bandit Black Bart was caught. His string of robberies proved a simple truth. The mere visible presence of a guy holding a 10-gauge shotgun changed a robbery from an easy payday into a terrible bet. But back to the words we use today. Did these rugged frontiersmen actually walk around saying they were riding shotgun? The short answer is absolutely not. The official job title in the 1800s was always shotgun messenger or express messenger. Nobody was standing in the dusty street yelling that they wanted to ride shotgun. The catchy verb phrase we use today actually shows up much later, specifically in early 20th century Western fiction, around 1919. What likely happened is that pulp fiction writers looked at the real historical job title and shortened it into an action verb for a bit of colorful flavor. It is what linguists call a back formation. Then movies and radio grabbed the phrase and spread the picture everywhere. The words were incredibly sticky. By the time cars started completely taking over the American roads, the phrase was primed and ready to hop right out of the horse-drawn coach and into the front seat. Hollywood is what truly locked the image into our collective brains. John Ford released his legendary film Stagecoach in 1939, showing the stoic guard perched up there beside the driver, holding a shotgun across his lap, with his eyes glued to the horizon. Then week after week throughout the 1950s and 60s, Massive television westerns like Gunsmoke and Wagon Train replayed that exact same dramatic view in living rooms everywhere. American kids completely soaked it up. At the exact same time all these westerns were airing, post-war American families were buying cars at an unprecedented rate. Giant steel station wagons filled the new suburbs. Kids piled into these massive cars for family road trips. And naturally, somebody wanted the best view. The frontier picture they saw on television just clicked into place. By the 1950s, dictionaries actually start recording the modern automotive meaning of calling shotgun. Popular culture perfectly collided with car culture, and the phrase stuck forever. Think about what the front seat job looks like today. Calling shotgun is actually just a tiny, harmless echo of frontier risk management. You still want to put your most alert, dependable friend up front. They help you navigate tricky directions. They keep an eye out for confusing exits and sudden hazards. They manage the snacks and control the playlist. The modern tools changed completely, trading buckshot and leather reins for Bluetooth and digital maps, but the underlying logic really did not. Just a quick note on the little myths and the timeline. Fact-checkers and historians have combed through 1800s newspaper archives, and they simply do not find real cowboys saying ride shotgun the way we do. It was always shotgun messenger back in that era. Pinning down the absolute first time a kid yelled it while running to a Ford station wagon is practically impossible, but that 1950s window aligns perfectly with the massive explosion of the television Western boom. So the next time someone yells shotgun and races you to the passenger door, picture the original job description. Eyes fixed on the treacherous road ahead. One hand ready to grab the heavy reins. A short, brutal 12-gauge resting across the lap, daring any highway bandits to step out of the brush and try their luck. And if you enjoy discovering the hidden backstories of the everyday things around us, stick around. Hit subscribe and drop a like if this ride was fun. There are plenty more little origin stories parked right here. See you in the next one.